James chapter 1, we're going to begin at verse 19 and read through verse 25. This you know, my beloved brethren, but everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Therefore, putting aside all filthiness and all that remains of wickedness, in humility receive the word implanted, which is able to save your souls. But prove yourselves doers of the word and not merely hearers who delude themselves. For anyone who is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks at his natural face in the mirror. For once he has looked at himself and gone away, he has immediately forgotten what kind of person he was. But one who looks intently at the perfect law of liberty, and abides in it, not having become a forgetful hearer, but an effectual doer, this man will be blessed in what he does. Okay, what do we think about that?
The first part, if we don't do it and do it right and do it consistently, which should be nice. I know that quick to hear and slow to speak, but sometimes get yourself in trouble all the time.
Mama told you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk.
And when you're told to bite your tongue, it does that when I'm eating, but maybe it should.
It never happens when it should happen, does it?
And I don't know if I don't think they say that here. But once those words are out of your mouth, you can't get them back. There's other things you can do to try to, but sometimes it's really, thank goodness for a wife that understands me and when I say something and act in anger.
You can't unring bells, can you?
But we can, even with each other, reduce that. We can make it better. I'm not saying we can forget about it. It happened, but just be honest. So through the love of Christ, through the love of each other, it's like a family. There's been times when I was mad at my parents. My parents were mad at me, but it still all came together. So I guess that's the thing I'm going to use the word enjoy, but I mean enjoy to my soul's benefit. The church, and the church here especially, there have been places where people wouldn't do that. They wouldn't look at each other. They was a part over here and a part over there, and there was always conflict. Well, don't see that here. And to me, that's beautiful. That's the way we're supposed to live. Not to help each other, but being able to forgive each other and then go about what we need to do. It makes you really realize that, I've got an earthly family, but I also have another family.
Well, it's again about engaging in a relationship, and relationships are give and take, and there's good times and bad times, and as opposed to achieving a status. And once you achieve a status, it's almost all you can do is fight to hold what you got. It's always trying to go down. So, Thelma, did you have something? Okay. So it's there's the old saying, "Sticks and stones will break your bones. Words will never hurt you." Well, sticks and stones will break your bones, but sometimes your words really hurt. And if you're a man who's ever been in a relationship with a woman, at some point she's going to say exactly what you said to her 5 years ago, verbatim, not one word wrong. You said exactly that, and so get that ketchup out and pour on that crow and eat it. That's the only thing you can do. So, but it's it is a good caution. This is like wisdom literature here, just a good daily advice. But it's also a manifestation of the relationship that we have entered into with God through Jesus Christ, and that's where we're kind of headed eventually. But here in James, but that's the idea of salvation by faith through grace, salvation by grace through faith, excuse me. But it has to be manifest as well. It's basically James. It does, for it to mean something, it has to change the way you live. It has to change the way you treat people, basically. And that's being the effective doer of the word, not just the hearer of it. I really like that imagery, especially as it's, translated in kind of our, I'm not going to say sexist, I'll say where the unknown gender is always a man, but a man that looks in the mirror and doesn't remember what he looks like. Psychologists have found that men always overestimate how good looking they are. The guy looks in the mirror and he thinks, oh, yeah, I still got it. I had an uncle that said he wore the same jeans he wore in high school, where he was wearing those button fly 501s, and he only buttoned 2 or 3 of them instead of all the way up, but he could wear them, the ones he wore in high school. And, the guys look, and then they look at it and they think they still got it. They never really had it to begin with, but they think they still got it. And then ladies look and they see every little problem, every flaw, and they blow it all up. And, all of the money spent on cosmetics and other things that women do to look a certain way. And for the most part, I think they're doing that for other women. They're just, it's a competitive thing. Thankfully, Dahlia's nodding her head and giving an okay to what I'm saying here. But I can tell you most of us guys aren't too worried about that. But that's maybe some guys are. I don't know. But it's just kind of the way the genders, I think, tend to be generally different, not always. And you don't see quite as much of it. I got to say, having grown up in the South, we had a lot of Southern belles around. They wouldn't come down for breakfast without putting their face on with their own family. A lot of times sometimes they weren't even allowed to. It's kind of like, you got to, and it's really weird, I think. But to me, if you can't eat breakfast in your jammies, you're not at home. If you've got to, you might as well go out to eat if you're going to do that. So, that's, we'll get kind of back to that topic a little bit later as well. But the idea of looking at the mirror, and I guess it works either way. If you look at the mirror and you come out thinking how great everything is, when it's not, that's a problem. And it can be a problem when you go look at the mirror and you think things are terrible, things are awful. I'm nowhere near, no way God loves me, no way God can have me in his kingdom. I don't have a place. I'm unlovable or whatever. And that's a problem too, isn't it? Either one, to be deluded by how you perceive what you see when you examine yourself.
That's what I said. That's part of our social media problem as teenagers, especially teenage girls. They get these things on their social media and they feel degraded by it. To the point where someone taking their lives. So, yeah, it's a difficult thing. The other point that I should have made earlier was on verse 19, that first part, my beloved brothers. So who is this addressed to? It's addressed to Christians.
It's addressed to the 12 tribes dispersed abroad. That's who the letter is addressed to. So it kind of comes back to that. It's these are the Jewish Christians probably that are in a weak point at a lower level of the social strata. And that matters as we go forward, certainly in understanding this letter, that he's talking to people that don't have all of the advantages in life. He's talking to people kind of at the bottom rung of the social hierarchy, and he's challenging to them as well. And that's the thing. Normally today, when we talk about people who are disenfranchised or at the bottom of a social structure, we try to lift them up by maybe making things easier for them, removing obstacles that we think are there. And I'm not going to get into all the value of that, but I will say that there's a lot of biblical precedent for speaking into people who are weak and challenging them and saying, from your weakness, let God work and lift you up. Rather than, society is going to I had the slide with the equity with the boxes and all that. That's Sherry after she saw my sermon on that. That said, I've seen that slide so many times. I'm just sick of it, So, somebody pointed out that, what kind of mind thinks, let's get more boxes. Why don't we get everybody in the stadium? Why don't we try to do that? Let them sit down and watch it in the stadium. That's another possibility, I guess. The world defines us in so many ways, but really only if we let them. If those are the standards to which we aspire. If the world says we're of value because of this, it's going to be something probably that is not what God values. And so when we look in the mirror, it's not really what do I look to the world that should matter so much as how do I look to God? And God sees our strengths and our weaknesses all the time, doesn't he? He doesn't need, he sees us and knows us better than we can ever know ourselves. So, to some extent, we all are in that relationship, even though it's about us, we don't have the fullest understanding.
And going with the God knowledge or God being so much greater than ours, 19 and 20, it says, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And no matter how angry you are or the wrath that you're trying to fix something it's not going to fix it the way God can fix it.
But slow to anger acknowledges the fact that anger is a God-given emotion. Every human being on the planet has the capacity to become angry. And that's because God made them with the capacity to become angry. It doesn't mean we're never angry. Sometimes the worst thing we can do is say we're not angry when we really are. It does mean kind of controlling your anger and really looking at what are you so angry about? Are you angry at the football game on television? Is that really worth getting angry about? Depends on who's playing, I guess. I can promise you that there's a lot of fans out there that care more about the outcome of the game than the players do, especially the ones who are getting paid a lot of money. I'm going home to a mansion after this game. I don't care I don't want to get hurt. I want to go home under my own power. At least that's how I would be if I was a football player. You get that big fat contract and you're like, I got a sore foot this week, coach. I don't think I can go, But then brave men run in my family, so I don't know. But it's James is pulling a lot of things here together. The law of liberty is the law we live under. It's the law we are to abide. And yet this law of liberty should be something that is manifest in our life. Yes, ma'am.
And in Ephesians, it tells us to be angry, but sin not. So just the being angry isn't what is wrong. It's how you treat it and what you do with it.
Our emotions are God-given. They are absolutely, every human being has the same capability of different. They may be more quickly to get into them. Some people are more emotional than others. But being happy, being sad, being angry, feeling guilty, feeling shame, all of these things are godly because they come from God. What puts us in those emotions, how we respond to those emotions, how we act in those emotions. At some point when you get too far into any one emotion, you may lose the capacity to control your behavior. If you just succumb total to your rage, I saw a video the other day, a young man confronted an older man on the road. He had road rage. And the old man had his cell phone in his hand, and the young man just knocked his cell phone right out of the old man's hand. The old man got him with a left cross, something right on the chin, knocked that soy boy out. He was out. Don't mess with an old man. Don't mess with one who's eating steak and turned a wrench and done manly things, and when you haven't done any of those things. When you get on the internet, that's all you do. Don't mess with that old man. If he goes 10 rounds, you'll probably beat him. But if he can get one shot in, that's it. So, when we get too far in our emotions, I think we see that so much in our society today. Part of it is social media. People used to act stupid, and there was no perpetual record of it that went out to the whole world instantly. People are live streaming horrible things now. They're live streaming criminal acts. I think some people have even live streamed their suicide. So it's, the idea that we're kind of living in our own little bubble is just gone, really. Everybody touches everybody. And that's, in a way, I think it has potential for a great advancement in humanity. I haven't seen it going that way yet. So far, it seems like it's making humanity worse. But instead of everybody living in isolation, pretty soon we're all going to be, connected. It's happening. I think we passed the total global population of 8 billion people this past week or so. The 8 billionth baby was born, and there was some dispute whether the 8 billionth baby was born in Africa or born in the Philippines. I'll let them sort that out. I don't know. But, I'm sure there were a lot of other babies that were, really close. So we're now safely over 8 billion people on the planet. And yes, there's a lot of empty space on the planet, but there's a reason everybody kind of lives where they live. And, there's a lot of overcrowding in the planet too. When you fly across America, you look down and you look, there's nothing down there. A lot of places, there's just absolutely nothing down there. And then you find, well, there's no water there, it's 10,000 feet above sea level. You can't even hardly breathe there or whatever, So there's space and room for us all, but we need to really reflect God's intentions for our lives. And that's kind of what wisdom literature kind of comes back to, is you've got to get along with people. There is kind of an informal, if unwritten and everything, social contract that, if we're going to live together, we all have to kind of control ourselves a little bit. And a lot of people are just losing control of themselves. I think they're just totally giving it. And like I said, it's probably always happened. We just didn't hear about it as much or as quickly. And it maybe didn't lead to so many other people. The local police officer who was shot just for no reason, really, just because he happened to be there or whatever. The guy was angry that he was losing his apartment, so he shot a cop. And that's, really a senseless act. And thankfully, he's going to be more or less okay, but permanently afflicted in some ways as a result of it. So he didn't get out of it unscathed. So we have this law of liberty. I think we're called to live in a way that is peaceful and beneficial to ourselves and our fellow neighbors. We're not on a lot of things just specifically told this is exactly what you're supposed to do. We're given the example of Christ. We take that and we incarnate it in our context, what's going on around us, the people in our lives, and it will look a little bit different from person to person. It looks different when you're a mother than when you're a father. Connie's story about Kitty's mother in the hospital, I'm not going to repeat it because it's pretty salacious, actually. But no, it's very nice. It's a beautiful story in its own way, and it's one that could happen then and would never happen in a million years now. And yet, what a wonderful blessing and thing it is. So cultures change. Kitty's mother could do that. Kitty's father couldn't do that, could he? So that's just kind of how that works. So we each have different opportunities and different ways to serve. And this is what I think the law is to look like. When you make people do it, it's not a law of liberty anymore, is it? When you force people to do it. And I don't like forcing I found out the term for it this past week. Agorist, I guess is how you pronounce it. Agorist. Someone who believes every human interaction ought to be voluntary. And that's kind of how I feel. You shouldn't have to do anything. You should do. I don't feel like if people feel like they come to church because they have to come to church, they're not going to do it very long, and they're not going to have a very good attitude when they're here, are they? You need to be here because you want to be here. And if you don't want to be here, don't be here. You're just going to ruin it for everybody else. I never really thought about it, but when I was practicing law, one of my associates one time said, they need to get rid of mandatory attendance at school, compulsory attendance at school, because they're forcing kids to go that don't want to be there, and they're making it hard for the kids that do want to be there. And now there's a lot of complexities and all of that and everything. I never wanted to go to school, but I was in school all the time. And I wasn't there, though, because I was scared of the truant officer coming around. Somebody else made me willing to go to exercise my liberty. I could go to school, or I could go to school with a red rear end. Those were my two choices, but I was going to school. So that's I wasn't given a similar approach to church attendance when I was growing up. I was going to be there. Do you want to be able to sit down while you're there or not? That was the question. So I really think we need to call people to use their liberty in a way that is beneficial rather than just an indulgence of our own desires. I think that's where we get now people who talk about liberty, and it's a way to do exactly what you want to do, as opposed to answering the call God has given you, answering the invitation that God has given you to come and live like He wants us to live, as it was modeled by His Son. Okay. So this again is very practical. We can take the practice though and go back and look at the why, can't we? It has the what rather than the why, and the why is because this is what Jesus did. Even as a teacher, Jesus gets angry at times, but how many times do you think Jesus could have gotten angry? He could have just stayed mad, couldn't he? So,
sometimes you see people that do that. When I get angry, then a lot of times I do lose that common sense that says, hey, if you keep this up, there's going to be negative results. But not really.
well, and for Christians, it's we're not following Christ. If we're controlled by our anger, then we're not controlled by Christ. And not controlled by the Holy Spirit. And
I think verse 21 here can easily be misleading to some people, where it says, receive with meekness in a bad word. Because so much in this country, the word meekness, I really believe is not used in a way that's used here.
no, we're not a.
Expand on that. I would like to see what.
Well, I think there's the old kind of, I guess you could say, cliche meekness is good power under control or whatever. I think meekness, we don't ever want to acknowledge that we're powerless. And there was stuff bouncing around the other day on the internet about how Jesus was never depressed, Jesus was never all these things, and it reflects this kind of very limited view of the world, which also comes into how they view Christ. That Christ is like a superhero. That Christ is John Wayne, basically. Listen good and listen tight, Pilgrim. All the time, always on top, always in power, always under control. And Jesus gave up all of that authority, gave up all that power, gave up all of that control to come down and be in among our mess. The messy Messiah, as he's been called. He came into the mess. And Jesus is weeping and sweating blood That sounds pretty depressed to me. That sounds very sad and very agonized to me. Jesus wept for his friend that he was about to bring back to life. He weeps for him. Every form of human suffering he can identify with, and we can find in him and understand that God knows what it's like. God is in control, but God gave up control. Jesus gave up control to come down here and be amongst us and let us do what we did to him. So it's just a much richer message and one that resonates. So many people, so many Americans can't imagine a life where they don't basically get everything they want and when they want it. You know, if the hamburger comes with pickles and you order no pickles, you're going to go back there and throw a fit. And so many people in the world they just basically accept whatever comes their way, and they don't feel like they have any agency. And I think they have a better understanding sometimes of these texts than we do. We should always look at them from basically a position of power, and so many of them were very weak. And the audience, I think, that James is writing to is weak, but he's still calling them to live a certain way. Last two verses. If anyone thinks himself to be religious and yet does not bridle his tongue but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is worthless. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained by the world. What do you think about that? Hi, Kim. Hi, Robin. Everybody's popular today. I guess there's something going on tomorrow or something everybody's checking on.
Yeah, Michael called me and they're coming over for Thanksgiving. So we're back up to 16.
Okay.
That's interesting. There in verse 6, though, the main issue there is God thinks he's religious, and does not bite his tongue. So it's not just thinking, it's the action, and the action is saying things. So it goes so much with what we read prior to this. What do we have in this life? Well, we have a brain, we have a tongue, and to control that tongue throughout the Bible is pretty strong about watching what we say and how we say it to people. What is the saying? Put the mining gear before the mouth, or something along that line. But I think that's another one of the things. There are so many in here, but this one really hits me in the sense that because of, I guess, my work, listening to supervisors about it. Listening to my supervisor, I had read and saying he can't discipline his crew because his crew has something on him. So what did he say, or what did he do or not do? So it's back to what we talked about. People sometimes they say and they do things, even in power, authority over other people, that leads to real problems, serious problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fascinating to me that this hits every one of us. Some of us more, some of us less. But it's there. We can talk to the people, talk to each other. The more we can watch what we say, and the more we can say the things that build us up rather than tear us down.
I've had it explained to me that really our lives are these triangles, and where one corner of the triangle is what we think, one corner of the triangle is what we feel, and one corner of the triangle is what we do. And I think you could include in that what we say. And you may not be able to help what you think, and you certainly may not be able to help how you feel, but you can help what you do. And with the fact that nobody's perfect in this regard, help what you say. And if you change that one angle of the triangle, if you change what you do and what you say, you naturally and inevitably change the other angles of the triangle. You change how you feel. You change how you think when you change what you do and what you say. And because the triangle is what, 180 degrees, all three angles added up to 180. So there's no, you change one of them, it's 60, 60, 60, and you change one of them, the other two have to change. So it's controlling what you can control to some extent. And, we're going to get into this more in chapter 2, but you can see why people who emphasize the teaching that we are saved by grace through faith and not of works have some issues with this book. And I think what we're doing, and we'll look at this more as we get into chapter 2, which is really kind of, I think, the heart of the book of James. But really, it's not so much about how we bring about our salvation. I don't think James is saying this is how you get saved, by making all the right choices, by controlling your tongue is not how you get saved. Controlling your tongue is how you reflect the fact that you are saved.
Well, again, doesn't that go back to who he's addressed this to, his brethren? And so that would signify that he's already talking to fellow Christians, and so that he's talking past that point.
And I would also, if you look back, in the main verse of all that, of course, is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. If you look at what Paul says there, talking about being saved by grace through faith, not of works, so that no one may boast. Again, he's kind of concerned about what we say, isn't he? He doesn't want us boasting. But that you were created, keep going in verse 9, but that you were created by Christ Jesus for good works. You're not saved by your works, but you were created for your good works. And if you're not doing good works, if there's not signs, manifestations that you are a Christian, that you are following Jesus Christ, more accurately, I would say, a disciple of Jesus Christ, an authentic disciple of Jesus Christ. If there's no indication of that, why would anyone believe that you are actually a disciple of Christ? And so it's not so much, again, that faith makes all these things happen, but it does reflect the fact that faith is alive, is working, and this is going to get, more contentious. It's hard to, we don't know exactly when any of the books were written, and we don't know for sure, certainly, who wrote this book. We think we do, but we're not sure. But you don't know if James has Paul's letter to Ephesus in mind when he's doing this, and is not contradicting it, but maybe refining it, expanding on it, applying it, maybe is the best term here. This idea that this is what this looks like. And Paul does so much time, and the other writers so much about why, and James is going to talk about what. And do we need one more letter that's just like all the other letters? Or is it nice to have a letter that does have a different focus, a different approach? The books of the Old Testament are very varied in their nature. Some of them are basically history accounts. This is how we got where we're going. This is how we became who we are. And then other books are, this is how you're going to live while you're there. And this is what happened to us once we got there. And, this is how we have hope. So it's not just about one. The Bible, the New Testament, is not exclusively written to convey the 5-point plan of salvation. There's a lot more there than that. And I really think James has an important role. I think it seems to us a lot because we have a tendency to kind of intellectualize the process, and other groups kind of feel it a little bit more, maybe, or work on a little more emotional level than we do. And we're kind of always thinking, what's the practical side of this? Because we think, what's the practical side of everything, right? So that's kind of how we understand it. So I think this book is always, since I've been aware of what's going on, I've noticed that this is a popular text in the churches of Christ. And I think that's one of the reasons, because that's James is kind of singing our song here. But it's not just about bridling your tongue. And I think sometimes we think about being religious in the context of not doing the wrong thing. But James says, pure and undefiled religion in the sight of God is doing the right thing, isn't it? It's not just avoiding the wrong thing. It is caring for the most vulnerable. You're the 12 tribes. You're the people on the bottom rung of society. Well, there's somebody below you. There's people, maybe they're in your number, but there's always a group that's more oppressed, more vulnerable than you are. And you need to care for them. You need to care for the orphans. You need to care for the widows. Because even now they tend to be pretty vulnerable, but they were certainly vulnerable in antiquity. When there was less awareness, less concern, when the strong oppressing the weak was just a fact of life. It's just how it worked. I don't know that it's really changed all that much, but we'd like to think it's changed in the last 2,000 years. So it's about doing the right thing. And in that process, when you're doing the things you're supposed to do, I think it helps you stay unstained by the world. You don't become consumed with what's going on in the world. That kind of gets fleshed out, I think, in chapter 2, where he talks about partiality and who are you really trying to please? Whose favor do you really want, and why do you want it? They don't want yours. Why do you want theirs? Okay. Let's stop. That's a good breaking point in chapter 1. We'll get into chapter 2 next week. The handouts have gone out, and we will jump into that next week. So thank you for your attention and your comments. Mr. Waite will lead us in a closing prayer now.